Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Therapeutic Talk at Lighting the Shire Spiritist Group. My name is Fran Diogo, and I'll be with you here tonight talking about the joy of life, suicide prevention. So this talk, of course, is touching on a subject which is very sensitive. So Lighting the Shire Spiritist Group, we want to acknowledge the individuals, the families, the communities that have been affected by suicide each year here in Australia and elsewhere if you're watching us from a different part of the world. We first of all would like to remind everyone as well, if you would like to join us, in case you were watching this talk before 8 p.m. on the 14th of September, the night that we actually have the therapeutic meeting, you're more than welcome to join us for a online Q&A session, some questions and answers, a discussion on the topic. So please feel free to join us. We would love to have you there. And if during this talk, anything becomes a concern to you regarding your own mental well-being or someone that you know, we would really encourage you to contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 here in Australia. If you want to text someone for support, there is a Lifeline text messaging service. So it's 0477131114. You just have to text up until 6 p.m. to from 6 p.m. to midnight, 7 days a week. Or if you need 24/7 support, we also have the suicide callback service available on 1300-659-467. This is 24 hours, 7 days a week counseling for anyone affected by suicide, including people at risk, carers, and those who are bereaved by suicide. So if you need any support because you're directly affected by someone else's suicide recently, our thoughts are with you, our love is with you, and we hope that this talk will also help shed some light of love and hope into the subject for you. So yeah, suicide is a very sad reality, but it does affect so many people all across the world. And just looking at the statistics on suicide in Australia, it is still the leading cause of death for Australians aged between 15 and 44. So people of such a young age are directly affected by this. And the most recent data that was available was from 2019, where 3,318 people have taken their lives. So it's 12.9 per 100,000 population. So it's a very high rate here in Australia. And it is a bigger number amongst males. So there's 2,502 deaths in males recorded in 2019. So 19.8 per 100,000 population, and only 816 suicide deaths per female. So 6.3 in 100,000 population. Still, life is such a precious thing. So we sincerely hope that with this information paired with all the other resources that we're pointing to here, you can help someone who is suffering, because someone must be in incredible suffering if they think that, living this life is the only solution. So we need to think about it from this perspective, how much suffering must have been in their hearts for them to decide to take this path. And we hope that people would feel more comfortable with supporting people who they see are in need. And if you think about this, if you're struggling at the moment, if you're feeling down, please be 100% sure that asking for help, there's no shame in it. It's very important that you do ask for someone to help you deal with your thoughts, with your pain, and hopefully there'll always be someone who loves you so much that they can actually do that. So it is a very tragic thing. Every 40 seconds in the world, someone dies of suicide. This is the World Health Organization statistics. So it's very sad, and also in suicide attempts data. So for every death by suicide, it is estimated that there are as many as 30 people who attempt to end their lives, and they might not be successful. So that's approximately 65,300 suicide attempts each year, only in Australia. So what could be the leading causes to suicide? So experts in the field say that 90% of suicides could be prevented if people can recognize the signals. So people might be desperate, they might be feeling shame for whatever reason, fear and loneliness. They are the most common reasons. And there is a lot that we can do with people around us that might be feeling those feelings. They might be experiencing those kind of emotions and situations. So this is definitely something that you should open our eyes to, how much importance our interventions can be for someone who's struggling at the moment. So another thing that we see from a spiritual point of view is materialism, or the belief that there's nothing beyond this life, is one of the greatest incitements towards suicide, because it leads people to think that dying is the quick way out. Whilst we, from a spiritist perspective, from a spiritualist perspective as well, we know for sure that life doesn't end. You know, this is just a temporary phase, being in the material body. So one of the most common thing that we have in spiritist literature is that the spirit who take their own life, the first thing they might realize when they get to the other side is, what have I done? Because they realize they haven't actually ended the pain. So that's another thing for us to take into consideration. Thinking that nothingness is the only heroic remedy is not a perspective. So it would actually create more suffering for us later on, because we would realize that we haven't achieved our goal, and we might have created suffering for ourselves and for people that we love. So the dissemination of this idea that death finishes it all is actually a poison. And Spiritism, with the ideas of life continues, there's hope after all, might bring the understanding that this is not the way forward. You know, that there's always a way forward better than this. There's always a solution. So with Spiritism, the doubt about the living after this material life is impossible. And the aspect of life changes completely. So this is what we hope when we believe in Spiritism, when we believe in life after this materialistic life, is that there's something beyond this reality. There's something that preceded our existence in this material life and justifies a lot of what we go through. And there's something waiting for us after this. So what we really take away from here is the love, the connections that we create with one another, the lessons that we have learned, the virtues that we have developed. So this is the most important part of our existence. This is what we should be cherishing. So all these things that we might put into a perspective, you know, when we're dealing with a moment of despair because of a financial loss, because of the loss of someone else we loved, or a disease, or anything that might be triggering a trauma. You know, a lot of people feel depression and therefore try to commit suicide because they really lose that value of themselves, the self-worth, the sense of self-worth because of trauma, because of violence, because of past experiences. So if we believe that there is more after this, that we can be redeemed from this reality, and it will not be like this forever, it does gives us a lot of hope into what it is to come. So as per the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have the clarification here. For the believer in the spiritual life, existence prolongs itself after the so-called death, although in many varied conditions. From this belief stems patience and resignation, which naturally leads all thoughts away from the idea of suicide. This is then the process which enables us to acquire moral courage. So, moral courage, patience, resignation would be just a few examples of virtues that we should be acquiring to help us deal with those moments of crisis, those moments of difficulty. Or if we see someone who's suffering, who's struggling, that is in our circle of friends, family, and so forth, giving them this idea of hope, helping them feel that strength when they are feeling quite weak and vulnerable. It's very, very important. Pointing them out to services, with specialists that can help them put another perspective or frame things differently for them and provide them immediate support if they're actually imminently in danger. So according to Spiritism, in the Spiritist codification, we have some explanation about suicide and madness. So the best way to avoid suicide and madness is learning to appreciate life. So the antidotes to such a crime could be listed as having calm and resignation, to understand that this material life is temporary, helping us see the temporary aspects of it, and that all the suffering, all the problems we might be dealing with immediately now, they're not going to be eternal. Confidence in the future. So the hope that we'll have a better outcome, after we go through this particular life, the challenges that we live today, gives us the serenity, which is the best preventative measure against madness and suicide. Believing in eternal life, in our possibilities to learn, to overcome problems with faith and courage, is what strengthens our resilience facing the temporary deceptions and all reverses. So knowing that everything has a reason. We studied this in Spiritism. We also studied that for every incarnation, we have a reincarnatory plan. We have a guardian angel, someone who was assigned to be with us all the way through. So these are friends who knows us really well from another life, and they are here to help us on those moments of weakness. So we need to learn to channel their advice, to meditate, to pray, to elevate our thoughts and ask for help when we know that we need their help, because they are side by side with us, waiting to assist us. And also the inner strength that we develop when we have this spiritual knowledge puts us above all these happenings. So protects us from shocks to the mind, which would cause serious disturbances. So when we develop this strong idea of the spiritual life, the eternal life, it will help us when we have these temporary challenges to say to ourselves, okay, I know this is challenging, I'm living through this, but it shall pass. It shall pass, and I'll be in balance again, whatever the outcome is. So we don't have a reason to be afraid of things that we're living through life. And also when we naturally pass away, we don't need to be afraid, because we know that if we are going at that particular time, not by our intervention, but by the design of the lifetime that we have planned for this particular life we're living, then it is because it was meant to be like that. So it's perfect the way it is. So we're not challenging those timings, we're not making our own interventions, interpretations of it. So this in a nutshell would help us understand why the Spiritist philosophy should help us. But there's a little bit more into the understanding of suicide as per Spiritism, which we always wanted to clarify as well. So there's two types of suicide according to the Spiritist philosophy as well. Unconscious suicide, which is what a lot of people don't realize they might be doing. So that one's important for us to reflect on. So those which occur due to drunkenness or madness or actions or vices which shorten our previously planned lifespan. So if we take on a vice, for example, alcohol or drugs, and because of the damage we create in our physical bodies from repeatedly using something like a substance or abusing something that creates a problem in our physical body, therefore creates a problem in our spiritual body, which are connected, and we shorten our lives by however many years that is, that's considered unconscious suicide, because we might not directly be wanting to take our lives, but we might be shortening our existence according to the original design that we had. So that's one to be very careful with. So in the book Heaven and Hell, there's a question about this kind of suicide. So there's an answer here to the question. Yes, he who commits suicide is linked to his body to the end of the period appointed for his earthly life. Natural death is the freeing of the soul from the bonds of the earthly life. Suicide leaves the links between the soul and body intact. So if we would have taken our lives away before the time that we were designed to live by, so one of the examples for those who have read the book or watched the movie, Our Home, Nosso Lar, André Luiz, the main character, he's a doctor, and he has shortened his life in about 8 years because of the abuses of alcohol, foods, and also he had syphilis from intercourse that he had outside his marriage as well. So he shortened his life in about 8 years. And that's the time that unfortunately he had to live through the pain that he caused to his own spiritual body in the lower spheres of life. So that's something that we really want to avoid. We don't want to have this discontentment from having to go through that, in our passage. So we need to be very conscious of our choices, what we do with our bodies, which are lent to us. It's like we have a time that we have to live using this material body. So we need to look after it, body, mind, soul, all connected. And we are constantly interchanging the energies between one and the other. So it is important to be physically well, to be mentally well, so we can be spiritually well. The three realms are connected. And we need to learn to be patient, to look after our physical bodies, be thankful to these physical bodies that we were given. And of course, there's the conscious suicide. So those who are so desperate that they can see no end to their suffering, and they decide that ending their lives will be the way to end it all, end the pain. So this unfortunate event, of course, can bring a lot of pain. And we can understand from their perspective, if you are under extreme suffering and you really know, it's your reality that this is the way to end it, it will make sense that this is how to shorten it, but we know it's not. So that's the alarm bells we want to put out there. So having this conversation might be very important, because it might help someone determine if they can have a different path in their lives. They might be able to see a solution to their problems instead of creating a bigger problem for themselves. So Spiritism produces these different perspectives on what happens to us. So Heaven and Hell, this book is amazing. It brings testimonies of happy spirits, how their life were, how did they encounter the spiritual reality on the other side of life when they arrive there. So they start with the happy spirits, and then they go down to the most suffering spirits that gave the testimonies through mediumship. So those who died by suicide, they inform a huge and happy situation in which they found themselves. So because they're going against one of God's most pure law, which is the law of life, prohibiting us to cut short our own lives, they suffer a consequence of their own action, which is extremely sad. But we also want to see we want to discuss another side of this, because unfortunately in the Spiritist community, there's a lot of thinking that every person who commits suicide will go through intense suffering on the other end. So if that was the case, we wouldn't believe in God's mercy so much, would we? So I recently watched a talk by Divaldo Franco, one of our greatest mediums, talking about how mothers can find solace in knowing that their children has taken their own life or lives. So he explains that it's not true that all spirits will be suffering extremely when they reach the other side of life, because God's mercy is enormous. If we were good, honorable people, we lived a very good life, and it was in a moment of despair that we were weak, that we might have chosen this path over the paths that we knew to choose, and we regretted it instantly. This is what we hear a lot through the spiritual testimonies that we receive through mediums. There's instant regret. So the spirit that has committed this action, if they've got enough merit because of all the positive actions they had throughout their lives, they will be surrounded by love. They would be helped. Of course, we all know, according to the divine law, we need to balance the imbalances that we create for ourselves. So, eventually down the track of our existence, we will have to repent and rebalance this action as well. But this doesn't mean that the spirit will have to suffer in the lowest spheres of life. Quite the opposite. He was remembering how one of his sisters took her own life, one of Divaldo Franco's sisters, and in honor of her situation, because sometimes people might commit these actions when they're really desperate. So he thought that his sister was extremely desperate and she left children behind. So he decided to adopt 10 children in the name of his sister as like a testimonial to his love for her, to honor her memory. So he was encouraging mothers, anyone who has lost their loved ones, to honor their memories, honor the positive things that they have done, because this sends them this loving energy that might help them with their situation on the other side of life. So it was a nice reminder, it's not all suffering. God is merciful. Like the universe, the divine is always around us to help us succeed. So it would never leave us in extreme suffering if we had planted seeds of love and goodness around us. So, yes, Spiritism has various reasons against this idea of suicide and the certainty of a future life in which he knows that his happiness will be in proportion to his misfortunes and the degree of resignation shown while on earth. So, for the spirit, knowing that if you're resigned, if you are trying to learn the lessons that we need to learn through the sufferings or the situations that we're living here at the moment, we know that we will equally have the recognition for that when we reach the other realm of life. The certainty that if we abbreviate our life, there will be a desired, an undesirable negative effect also helps us because we stop and reconsider this potential idea, the suicidal ideation. So I guess this is a summary of what we are trying to convey. So in the book Spiritism in its simplest expression, we also have a little bit about that. So I'm just going to read this to wrap it up, and then we can have a closing reflection. So amongst the most frequent causes of brain overexcitation, we must include disappointment, misfortune, and thwarted affections, which are the most frequent causes of suicide. True Spiritists, however, see the things of this world from such a comprehensive point of view that for them troubles are nothing more than the disagreeable incidents of a journey. That which might cause a violent emotion in others barely affects Spiritists at all. They know, moreover, that life sufferings are trials that aid their advancement if they bear with them without complaining, because they will be rewarded according to the courage with which they have endured them. Their convictions thus endow them with a resignation that saves them from despair and consequently from an ongoing cause of insanity and suicide. Also, because of what they have seen through communication with spirits, they also know of the deplorable fate of those who intentionally shorten their days, and this picture serves well to make them reflect. Hence, the number of those who have opted against choosing that disastrous slope is considerable. This is just one of the results of Spiritism. So, what we wanted to remind everyone about for this talk is please always consider the hope that tomorrow might bring. It doesn't matter how difficult the situations we're living at the moment can be. They always have a good purpose, and there will always be a better reality tomorrow. This is a fact. We should be hopeful. We should be open to helping each other out as well, because, you know, we're all vulnerable to feeling sad, to feeling depressed. And sometimes it's one moment of despair when we are already in that state of mind that might cause us issues. But we are living through very challenging times at the moment, like we were saying at the beginning of the talk. So there's no harm in looking for a friend to say, look, I'm feeling a little down. Let's talk through this. You know, maybe you won't be able to meet this person face to face because of the restrictions we have at the moment, but you can talk to them. You know, that's what we're here for each other for. So we wanted to leave the talk with this message of hope and love. You know, let's care for one another. Let's help each other out through these challenging times that we're living. And if you know anyone who has been impacted by depression because of losses of any kind, because of anxiety, the anxiety of the moment that we're living, the panic attacks that people are having because of these threats that have been published in the media, forced down upon us, as you know, so we should always trust that there's a positive reason for things being the way they are, things that are not under our control, we need to relinquish the control to the universe, to the divine, and learn to trust, learn to develop the strength in our faith, and use the resources that we have. Talk to each other, talk to a therapist or someone who can listen to your concerns and help you if that's the case. And for those who have lost their loved ones, if this brings you any consolation that it's not completely finished and there's hope and mercy and they have been looked after on the other side of life for sure, cherish those positive and happy memories, send them vibrations of love, because those vibrations, those thoughts will definitely go a long way in helping them in their recovery journey and knowing that they're remembered with love, not with shame or anger or any of those emotions that's not going to help them in the process either. So that's what we wanted to leave you with. Again, you're more than welcome to join us for the online Q&A, the discussions, and we are sharing the details on our page here. So you can join us via Skype from 8 p.m. on the 14th of September after this talk. So if you had the chance to listen to the talk beforehand, we look forward to seeing you. Otherwise, we hope that a lot of peace stays with you and you can all stay well. Peace be with you. We'll see you next time. Thank you.